Christmas, birthdays, back to school, everything just appeared. New sneakers, backpacks, games, clothes. I used the babysitting money to buy my own school supplies, my own clothes, my own shampoo when the one in the house ran out and nobody restocked my bathroom. At 16, I got a job at a fast food place. I worked after school, Tuesday through Saturday. I'd come home smelling like grease. Linda never complained, never forbade it, never said, "You're too young for this." Quite the opposite. "See, you're learning the value of things." The value of things. As if the boys didn't need to learn it. When Tyler got his license, he got a used car. When Brandon got his, he got Tyler's old one, and Tyler got a newer one. When I got my license, I got a congratulations and kept taking the bus. I never complained, not once. Every time the thought appeared, "This isn't fair," the creature in the back stirred. The orphanage, the cold walls I'd never seen but imagined in detail. You were chosen. My mom told me that so many times it became almost like a lullaby. I was the adopted daughter, the special one, the one God brought to complete the family. I believed that for 30 years. Until the day I found a birth certificate hidden in a safe in the back of her closet. My biological parents' names were right there, and I knew them. They sat next to me every Thanksgiving. But before I get to that part, I need to go back to the beginning, because nothing that happened in that bedroom makes sense without understanding what came before. My name is Nora. I'm 30 years old. I'm an engineer, married, and the only adopted daughter of a family that never pretended I was blood. My mom, Linda, made a point of repeating, "I didn't need to give birth to you to love you. God brought you to me." She'd say it with her eyes shining, squeezing my hand, like I was the greatest gift she'd ever received. And I believed her. Why wouldn't I? I had a roof. I had food. I had a mother who baked a cake for my birthday every single year without fail. Vanilla with chocolate frosting, the same one since I was 5. I had a dad, Gary, who drove me to school in the morning and checked that the door was locked before bed. I had 2 older brothers, Tyler and Brandon, who called me Shorty and sometimes let me watch TV with them on the couch. It was a family. And I knew, from the moment I was old enough to understand, that I was very lucky to be there, because the alternative terrified me. I knew almost nothing about my biological parents. I knew I was given up for adoption a few days after birth. I knew I spent a brief time in a temporary foster home before Linda and Gary adopted me. And I knew that if it weren't for them, I could have grown up in an orphanage. That idea, the orphanage, lived in the back of my mind like a creature I couldn't kill. Every time I felt anything close to ingratitude, the creature stirred, and I swallowed whatever I was feeling. If you've ever been the person who swallows everything because you think you have no right to complain, drop it in the comments. Because this story is about the day I stopped swallowing. Growing up in the Miller house wasn't bad. I need to make that clear. There was no yelling, no violence. Linda was religious, went to church every Sunday, and treated us with a sweetness I still believe was genuine. At least mostly. But there was a difference. Something I felt before I knew how to name it. Tyler and Brandon were biological children. 2 boys, older than me. Tyler by 3 years, Brandon by 5. When I came home from school and told my mom something, she'd listen with a smile. When Tyler came home, she'd stop what she was doing, put down the pot, sit down, ask every detail. I didn't understand it as favoritism at the time. I thought, boys are harder, they need more attention. That's what I told myself. On the boys' birthdays, the house was packed. 20, 30 kids, bounce house in the yard, candy table, balloons up to the garage ceiling. On my birthday, Linda made the vanilla cake with chocolate frosting. We'd sing happy birthday as a family. I'd blow out the candles and feel loved. I never asked for more than that. I didn't think I could. Gary was protective of me the way a father should be. He taught me to ride a bike, checked my seatbelt twice, and once nearly got into a fight with a neighbor who made a comment about me being the adopted one. But when Tyler scored a goal in soccer, Gary screamed so loud you could hear it from inside the house. When I got a good grade, he'd say, "Good job," and go back to his newspaper. I didn't complain. Complaining was a luxury that didn't belong to me. I had been chosen, and chosen people should be grateful. Linda reinforced that without realizing it, or maybe she did. "You're my princess," she'd say, stroking my hair. God knew I needed a girl. And then she'd go to the boys' room to help Brandon with his homework while I finished mine alone at the kitchen table. My brothers were never cruel to me. Tyler defended me at school. Brandon shared his lunch when I forgot mine. They knew I was adopted. My mom never hid it. But they were kids when I arrived. To them, I was simply the younger sister. The difference they felt was the same one I felt. Our parents were more present with them, but none of us said it out loud. At 14, I started working as a babysitter for the neighbors. Twice a week, sometimes 3 times. Linda thought it was great. "This will teach you responsibility," she said, with that smile of someone who thinks they're doing you a favor. Tyler and Brandon never worked. Tyler played soccer and spent his afternoons on video games. Brandon played guitar and went out with friends. Neither of them had to lift a finger to buy anything, and I swallowed. Linda kept making my cake every year, vanilla with chocolate frosting, and I kept blowing out the candles, thinking that was enough love. I finished high school with grades good enough to get a partial scholarship in engineering. When I told my parents, Linda hugged me and said she was proud. Gary shook my hand. They both said the same thing. "But you'll need to work to support yourself. We can't afford to pay for housing and food." Tyler had gone to college with everything paid for. Brandon, too. I said nothing. I packed my bags, moved into the cheapest dorm I could find, and got a job as a waitress at a restaurant near campus. I studied during the day, served tables at night, slept 5 hours when I could. It was at that restaurant that I met Caleb. He was a student too, worked in the kitchen. Tall, quiet, with the kind of calm that seems to come from within. We started talking during breaks. He'd ask about my classes. I'd ask about his. One December night, he gave me a ride back to the dorm and said, "You work harder than anyone I know. Your parents must be really proud." And I said yes, that they were. Months later, Caleb met my family at a Sunday lunch. He saw the house, saw the boys' cars in the garage, saw Gary watching the game with Tyler while I helped Linda in the kitchen. On the way back, in the car, he was quiet for a while. Then he said, "Why do you work as a waitress if your parents can clearly help you?" I changed the subject. He didn't push it. But the question stayed in the car like a third passenger nobody invited. We graduated together, both engineers, got married a year later, small ceremony, no big party. Linda made the cake, vanilla with chocolate frosting. I laughed when I saw it. Some things never change. After the wedding, we moved to a town 20 minutes from my parents' house. Caleb thought it was too far from his work. I insisted. "If something happens to them, I want to be close." He agreed without arguing. That's how Caleb worked. He didn't need to understand to respect it. Tyler lived in another state, Brandon in a suburb 2 hours away. They both had their lives, their careers, their own problems. They'd show up at Christmas and Thanksgiving, called me on birthdays, loved me in that distracted way of older brothers who've already figured out their own lives and assume you've figured out yours. Thanksgiving was the family event. Linda started cooking 2 days before. Turkey, mashed potatoes, pumpkin pie, cranberry sauce. The table was always full, and every year, without fail, 2 extra places were set. Aunt Diane and Uncle Frank. Diane was my mom's younger sister, almost 10 years apart. She was beautiful in a way that turned heads, always well-dressed, hair always done, a perfume I could smell before she walked into the room. Frank was an engineer like me, funnily enough, worked at a big company. They lived 40 minutes away and showed up for the bigger holidays. Diane was polite with me. She'd ask how I was, comment on the weather, compliment Linda's cooking. But that was it. She never pulled me aside to talk, never gave me a birthday present. She and Frank had 2 kids who ran around the house like they owned the place. Loud kids, full of energy. Diane was attentive to them in an instinctive way I thought was sweet, but never thought much about. Gary sat at the head and carved the turkey. Linda thanked God for the family being together. And I'd look around the table, grateful, not knowing that the answer to my entire life was sitting right there in front of me. The call came on a Tuesday morning. Linda had slipped in the bathroom. Compound fracture of the tibia. Surgery, pins, a cast, and the doctor's orders. Absolute rest for at least 6 weeks. No stairs. I called Tyler. Man, that's rough. Keep me posted, okay? I called Brandon. I'll try to come this weekend. I hung up the phone and looked at Caleb. He already knew what I was going to say. I'm going over there. We set up a makeshift bed in the living room. Linda couldn't go upstairs to the bedroom. I started going every day, early morning until night. I bathed her, made the meals, did laundry, cleaned the house, managed the medications. Gary tried to help, but was clumsy with those things. He always was. The boys showed up when they could. Tyler came one weekend. Brandon sent messages asking how she was doing. I didn't complain. I was the daughter who lived nearby. I was a woman. It was easier for me. Linda was grateful in a way I'd never seen. She'd hold my hand when I adjusted her pillow. She'd say, "Thank you, my daughter," with a choked voice. For the first time in my life, I was the priority. And as beautiful as it was to hear that, a part of me knew I was only the priority because nobody else showed up. One afternoon, while Linda slept in the living room, I went upstairs to tidy up her bedroom. The clothes had piled up. I opened the closet and started folding and putting things away. When I pushed the hangers aside to organize better, I saw something I didn't expect. Behind the hanging clothes, built into the wall, a safe. Small, gray, with a numeric keypad. Hidden behind the coats nobody wears in summer. I had never seen that safe. Small, gray, heavy. It had a numeric keypad, 6 digits. I knew the password. Linda used the same combination for everything. The first 2 digits of each child's birthday. Tyler, Brandon, me. In that order. She thought it was poetic when she created it. That way you 3 are always protecting what matters, she told me once when I saw her typing in the bank password. I typed it in. The safe opened with a dry click. Inside, a stack of old bills, dollars that looked decades old. An envelope with yellowed photos of people I didn't recognize. A young woman holding a baby. The photo was so old the colors had turned sepia. Property documents for the house. Old bank statements. And at the bottom, underneath everything, a brown envelope, thin, sealed with tape that had already lost its adhesive. I opened it. A birth certificate, with the state seal, the notary stamp, the date. My date of birth. My name. Nora. The same name. My biological mother gave me this name before handing me over, and when Linda adopted me, she kept it, changed the last name to Miller, but the name stayed. 30 years of being called Nora, and I never knew it was the woman I called Aunt who chose that name. And 2 names in the parents field. I read it once, read it again, read it a 3rd time because my brain refused to process it. Mother's name, Diane Holloway. Father's name, Frank Holloway. Aunt Diane, Uncle Frank. The people who sat at the Thanksgiving table every year, who complimented Linda's turkey, who politely asked me how I was doing and never waited for the answer. My legs gave out. I sat on the floor of my mother's bedroom with that paper in my hands, and the entire world rearranged itself around me like a puzzle that finally made sense. And the picture was horrible. I came down the stairs with the birth certificate in my hand. Every step felt like I was carrying the 30 years that had brought me there. Linda was awake on the makeshift bed, watching television. When she saw me standing in the living room doorway with that paper, the smile died. She looked at the certificate, looked at my face, and closed her eyes. "Where did you find that?" "In the safe, in your closet." Silence. The sound of the television continued. Some cooking show, someone explaining how to make puff pastry. I turned it off. "Diane is my mother." It wasn't a question. Linda opened her eyes. I saw something I'd never seen on her face. Not guilt, not shame. Exhaustion. The exhaustion of someone who's carried a secret for 3 decades and knows the moment to let go has arrived. "Sit down, Nora." "I don't want to sit down." "Please." I sat, and she told me. Diane was her younger sister, almost 10 years apart. When Diane married Frank, it was a big, beautiful wedding, everyone happy. Shortly after, Diane got pregnant, and Frank, who had just received a job offer in Europe, didn't want kids. Not at that moment. Maybe never. Diane wanted to terminate the pregnancy. Linda, religious as she'd always been, begged her not to, insisted, pressured, used every argument she had, God, family, regret. I told her that when she saw the baby's face, everything would change, that she'd get attached, that she'd understand. And she didn't get attached. Linda shook her head. A few days after the birth, Diane signed the papers, gave the baby up for adoption, and moved to Europe with Frank. And you adopted me. "I wasn't going to let you go to a stranger, Nora. You are my niece, my blood." Linda explained the rest. She and Gary already had Tyler and Brandon, 2 small boys, full house. But when Linda found out her niece was in the system, she didn't hesitate. She convinced Gary. He didn't object. He never objected to anything Linda decided with that conviction in her eyes. "I never hid that you were adopted because I had hope. I thought that one day Diane would want to tell the truth, that she'd look at you and wouldn't be able to stay quiet." "Then why did she come back from Europe and never say anything?" Linda took a deep breath. When Diane and Frank came back, years later, things between the 2 sisters were strange. They barely spoke. The adoption had created a crack. Linda then made the invitation. Come back to the family. Come back for the holidays. Thanksgiving, Christmas, birthdays. She wanted to keep her sister close. She wanted Diane to watch her daughter grow up. She wanted the truth to slowly become inevitable. Diane agreed to come back, with one condition. Linda would never tell. Diane didn't want a bond, didn't want guilt, didn't want to be the mother of a child she didn't choose to have. And you accepted that. I accepted because it was the only way to have my sister back, and because I thought time would soften her heart. It didn't. No, she moved on, had other children, the ones she wanted to have, and sat at the table next to you every year without saying a word. I stayed silent. 30 years, 30 Thanksgivings, 30, "How are you, Nora?" followed by 30 polite smiles. And underneath it all, the truth. That woman gave birth to me, gave me away, and pretended I was just her sister's adopted niece. Linda was crying. I wasn't. "I love you, Nora. I need you to know that. It wasn't out of obligation. It wasn't out of guilt. I wanted you, from day one." I looked at her, leg in a cast, hair pulled back any which way, face swollen from crying, and said what I felt. "I know, Mom, and I thank you. For everything." I hugged her. She sobbed on my shoulder, and in that moment, in that embrace, I wanted to believe it was true, that the love was pure, that the choice came from the heart. But when I got home that night and Caleb asked me how the day was, I fell apart. I don't know if she really loved me or if it was guilt for pressuring her sister. I don't know if the favoritism was because I was adopted or because I was the daughter nobody wanted. The boys got everything, Caleb, everything, and I got a vanilla cake and a pretty phrase. Caleb was quiet for a while. Then he said, Are you going to stop being grateful now? I couldn't answer. I stayed awake all night. I replayed every memory, every birthday without a party, every piece of clothing bought with my own money, every bus I took while my brothers drove. Every "you need to learn the value of things" I swallowed, thinking it was a lesson, when maybe it was the difference between a daughter of blood and a daughter of convenience. But deep down, way deep down, beneath the anger and the confusion, I felt something that surprised me. More gratitude, not less. Because if Linda hadn't insisted that Diane have the baby, if she hadn't gone after the adoption, if she hadn't taken me into her home, I might not even exist. I might have grown up in the system. I might never have met Caleb. I decided something before falling asleep. I wasn't going to confront Diane. I didn't need that confrontation. She made her choice 30 years ago, and I made mine now. I should have known my mother wouldn't be able to keep another secret. 2 weeks later, on a Saturday afternoon, the doorbell rang. Caleb went to answer. He came back to the kitchen with an expression I couldn't decipher. "There are people here for you." I went to the door. Diane and Frank. Standing on my porch, she was holding her purse with both hands, gripping the strap like it was the only thing keeping her in place. Frank was a step behind, hands in his pockets, and the look of someone who'd rather be anywhere else in the world. "Can I come in?" Diane said. Her voice wasn't polite like at Thanksgiving. It was small. I let them in. We sat in the living room. Caleb said he'd make coffee and disappeared into the kitchen. The three of us sat in silence until the silence became too heavy. "Linda told me," Diane began, "that you found the certificate." "I did." "Nora, She stopped, breathed, tried again. "I can't explain it in a way that makes sense. I was young, 23. Frank had this opportunity in Europe, and I couldn't see myself being a mother. Not then, not like that." "But you came back. You had other children." "I know," her voice broke. "When we came back and I started seeing you at the holidays, you were already a little girl. You already called Linda Mom. You already had a life, and I thought it was easier not to disturb that telling you would confuse you, that it could traumatize you." Frank spoke for the first time. "We convinced ourselves it was better that way, that you were well taken care of, that you didn't need us." "And did I?" I asked. He didn't answer. Diane continued. "I regretted it. Not at first. At first I moved on like nothing had happened. But over the years, every time I sat at that table and saw your face, I knew I was wrong, and it was easier to keep being wrong than to fix it." "I want you to be part of our family," she said, "if you want. I know it's late. I know it might be too late." I stared at Diane for what felt like too long. Her face. I tried to see my face in it, in the shape of the eyes, the curve of the mouth, something. Maybe it was there. Maybe I was imagining it. "I accept the apology," I said. "Truly. I understand you were young, that things got complicated, and I believe you regretted it." Diane let out a breath as if she'd been holding it for 30 years. "But I don't need other parents." Her face changed. It didn't fall, it adjusted, like someone who expected to hear exactly that, but had allowed herself to hope. "I have a mother. She's not perfect. She treated me differently from the boys my whole life, and I'm going to need time to process that. But she wanted me. She chose me when you didn't, and that counts for something." Frank nodded. Diane wiped her eyes. "This is all very new to me," I continued, "and scary. I spent 30 years building my story one way, and now you show up wanting to rewrite it. I'm not ready for that. Maybe one day I will be, but today I'd rather things stay the way they are." They left half an hour later. Diane hugged me at the door, the first real hug she'd ever given me. It lasted 3 seconds. I smelled her perfume. the same perfume I smelled every Thanksgiving. Caleb appeared with 2 cups of coffee that nobody drank. He sat next to me on the couch, said nothing, just stayed there. "Do you think I did the right thing?" I asked. "I think you did what was yours to do." A few weeks later, Tyler and Brandon came to visit Linda, who was still recovering. I pulled them aside in the kitchen and told them everything: the certificate, Diane, Frank, the 30 years of silence. Tyler looked at me like I'd spoken in another language. Brandon leaned against the counter and crossed his arms. "So," Tyler said, "does that change anything?" "Does it change anything for you?" "Nora, you've been my little sister since I was 5 years old. A piece of paper isn't going to change that." Brandon nodded. "Nothing's changed for us. You're still Shorty." I laughed for the first time in weeks, and that, more than any apology, any explanation, any hug from Diane at the door, was what made me feel like everything was going to be okay. That night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I thought about the phrase that had defined my entire life. You were chosen. And for the first time, the phrase didn't hurt, because now I knew the whole truth, and the gratitude I felt was no longer that blind, automatic gratitude born from the fear of an orphanage. It was a conscious gratitude. Chosen. Mine. Linda wasn't perfect. Diane wasn't a monster. Life wasn't as simple as a vanilla cake with chocolate frosting. But it was mine. All mine. And for the first time in 30 years, I didn't need to swallow anything to be at peace with it. If you've ever discovered a truth that turned your life upside down, tell me in the comments. And if this story touched you, subscribe to the channel, because this is just one of the stories I have to tell.